Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and one more live nights on hotel Wi Fi. So hopefully, we do well there. Then I will be flying back tomorrow to Minneapolis, and we'll be back in the old studios. And the next time you hear from me on the podcast, we'll be following the Vikings' second preseason game, which, of course, has had a lot of the juice taken out of it, but we still have a lot of things to watch in that game against Cleveland. But I'm not staying for the game. I'm going back home. Maybe if JJ McCarthy had been playing, it would have been a little different, but I'll be watching it. And Dane Mizutani and I are going to have a full breakdown after that game of everything that we saw. But figured we would jump in here and talk about today's practice wrapping up for the Minnesota Vikings and the Cleveland Browns, which I had a chance to attend. And it was a beautiful day out here in Cleveland and another physical practice. I don't think it was quite as aggressive as the first day. There was a lot of, John going on and so forth, but it wasn't quite as much the Cleveland Browns dominating the Vikings offense today as it was yesterday. So we'll dive into that. We can run through some of the notes from today and then talk about the implications of these here joint practices. But I did want to start with a mild celebration. Let's celebrate this fact that this podcast, in its name, the headline, does not have anybody's injury. So for today, the Vikings largely came out okay, injury-wise. Blake Cashman had a finger thing, and it doesn't look like it's going to be too serious. But aside from that, there was no cart. There was nobody being announced out for the rest of the year. So progress has been made from the last couple of days of covering the Minnesota Vikings, and we can just go back to talking about normal training camp stuff, like where the roster stands here, what things looked like in the joint practices, and what it all means to where the Minnesota Vikings are going, big takeaways, and of course, happy to answer your questions here this evening. And I apologize, I'm on a little bit of a wobbly desk here in the hotel room, so if I'm pushing buttons and I'm wobbling around, I apologize for that. So let's start off, though, with just some of the headlines on the injury front. All not too bad. Jordan Addison avoided major injury, which is what Kevin O'Connell said to us, the couple of reporters who were here. He did say that yesterday, but then came out and confirmed today that no major injury, a couple of weeks. And just by the way that he said it, I got the sense that they don't think that Jordan Addison is going to miss any games. And that is a big bonus for them. He doesn't need a lot more practice. He's Jordan Addison. He's very good at football. We all know that. So this one truly was a tweak. And if you've been around long enough, you know the reference to the Danielle Hunter tweak. And then he ended up out for the season a couple years back. But this one truly was an ankle tweak for Jordan Addison. Shaq Griffin was doing some stuff out here, doing a little more today and just jogging, getting warmed up. And Kevin O'Connell said somewhat definitively that they expect him to be back and ready to play in week one. I actually thought that the cornerbacks today had a pretty good day, didn't get dominated at all. Dwight McGlothern got a notable interception, and the defense was way ahead of the offense today. It was an excellent, excellent day for the Vikings defense against Deshaun Watson, and an offense that I got to tell you, in Cleveland, they should be panicking about. That's somebody else's podcast, but Deshaun Watson did not look good. Jameis Winston looked even worse over these last 2 days. They could probably use Joe Flacco back from the way that this looked. There was very little in terms of execution, but that's also on the Vikings side, very much a positive toward their defense, which we'll get into. So Shaq Griffin, if he returns, that would be a bonus for them. And Blake Cashman with the finger injury, not super serious. Seems like he just got a cut and will be stitched up and he'll go back to playing. So let's talk about the defense. Started out the day. So I mentioned yesterday that I try to the way that it works is two different fields, and I try to pay attention to both and get as much as I can. I can't see every single thing that happens and every single player who subs in or subs out because I'm trying to watch offense and defense. So I stood in kind of the middle of the two fields. I could look over here. I could look over there, see the offense running the drills in the red zone. I could see the defense playing 11 on 11s with Cleveland. And what I noticed right away, it actually started with a 7-on-7 drill. Ivan Pace Jr. jumped in front of a ball, picked it off, would have been a pick six, if you will. They got a lot of turnovers today in this game and also, or this practice, sorry. And a lot of balls that would have been sacks that Deshaun Watson eventually threw and maybe were completed, but there was a lot of pressure on him. Brian Flores was really getting in his bag. And I think if you're on Cleveland's side, you have to be extremely frustrated with these couple of practices. I'll be interested to go and look at some more Cleveland media and see what they said about this, because yesterday the Cleveland media was none too pleased with their offense, and I don't think it was any better today against this Vikings defense that I'm starting to be convinced can be very good this season, even if they have to work around the corners. But there was no real update on Stephon Gilmore aside from Kevin O'Connell saying he would like to see him here. I didn't say that exactly, so don't quote that anywhere. That was the vibe. The vibe is that Kevin O'Connell has continually, when he's been asked about Stephon Gilmore, heaped praise upon him and said that they're more or less waiting on maybe a decision from Stephon Gilmore. I'm filling in a little too many of the blanks from his actual quotes, but that's my vibe. That's what I'm getting from them, is that they would like Stephon Gilmore to play here, and they're waiting on a decision from him. But even without Stephon Gilmore, there was a lot of success on the defensive side here in this practice. The edge rushers particularly stood out to me. I thought that the safeties wreaked all sorts of havoc in these practices. They were stopping runs. They were getting penetration. There were a few plays where corners got beat, as there always will be in practice, but they were taking the ball away. Just lots of problems. And I know this is not one of the better offenses in the NFL in the Cleveland Browns. Still, though, they were making them look like the worst offense in the NFL. It probably helped that they didn't have Amari Cooper today for this practice. He left early in the practice. I didn't see whether he came back at all, but it didn't look like it to me that he came back and was practicing. The main thing was Watson just could not seem to get on the same page with his receivers. Didn't look like he was in rhythm at all. It looked like the Vikings defensive line was really throwing off the dropbacks. There was one particularly strong rep from Dallas Turner where he shoved his man back into Deshaun Watson. He scrambled, but he would have been sacked. And you hear the whistle blow, like that's a sack. That's always something that the offense wants. And then when they did the 2-minute drill, the Vikings gave up just nothing to Deshaun Watson whatsoever, nothing to Jameis Winston whatsoever. And what we might be seeing a little bit more of here, and don't want to jump the gun on this, but a little bit more along the lines of depth. And the cornerback position doesn't really count here at the moment. We're still talking about the same things at the cornerback position. But as far as Patrick Jones working in, Jihad Ward is working in a lot with the first team as part of a pass rush package. And if Patrick Jones is in the right role, then Van Ginkel, Grenard, Turner, and Ward, who has played a lot in the NFL and was at his best when he was with Baltimore as a situational pass rusher, suddenly you feel like you got kind of a lot to work with there as far as a bunch of pass rushers. And it really showed when they were having someone like Jihad Ward rush up the middle, Patrick Jones rushing up the middle a bit, and Turner has just looked like he's really coming along and somebody that can make an impact right away. And that's at least as far as, you're not going to see JJ McCarthy, but there's this other guy in Dallas Turner. Don't forget about him. That appears now at this point that he is going to be a major part of this defense. And they couldn't have asked for a better training camp from him. Start to his preseason. He just zooms around the left tackle, ends up getting a sack in the game against the Raiders. I don't know if he's going to play. My guess would be no, because he took a ton of reps in these last couple of days, which I think they wanted to see from him as somebody that is going to probably play a pretty big role in this defense. Metellus was very good today from my eye. Harrison Smith was causing a lot of problems. Just the confusion that you saw from quarterbacks last year with Flores, it seems to be even more now because they have just more talented players than I think they did last year. And the defense looked very strong. There was no way to come out of this and not say, you know what? This defense is going to have a chance to battle each week, and they're going to have to do it because they're going to face some very good offenses to start the season. Not against New York, but then after that, they will. They're going to be tested, but if they're healthy in every place except for Mekhi Blackman being out, then this defense could be stronger than it was last year. And that was really on display from what we saw here in Cleveland. On the offensive side, a few things that I noticed. I just wrote Jefferson because always Jefferson, but in the red zone drills, he was very, very good. Caught a couple of touchdowns, a lot of yapping back and forth after that with Cleveland's cornerback. And what I did notice today that didn't look very good yesterday was that they were running the ball pretty well. And Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler, this duo has a chance to be a huge upgrade on where they were last year. And Aaron Jones, we'll see what happens with his overall health. And they have not given him a ton of reps throughout this entire training camp and preseason out of precaution because he's Aaron Jones and he's 29 years old. And once a running back hits 29, it's like any of us being 68 in their years. But he looks like he's got some juice to him still and some jump that he had at the end of last year when he was dominating for the Packers. And that showed up today. They got better blocking on the offensive line today. I thought that they had a better plan for Myles Garrett where they got Josh Oliver hitting him a little bit more. And Oliver made a great catch today as well. He did yesterday. Also, one of their better plays was kind of a line drive down the middle of the field to Josh Oliver. And I'm really curious about how they work that, whether we're going to see Oliver and Johnny Munt, whether Oliver is going to get more of the Hockenson reps. It's always felt like it was going to be Munt doing that, but Oliver has started to get in more involved in the receiving game. And I think that they always saw when they signed him and gave him a lot of money upside in Josh Oliver as a receiving option. He does catch the ball. He's got enormous hands and he uses them pretty well. I'm a little bit interested to see if he's on the field a lot more than he was last year. And if he's a little more involved in the receiving game because TJ Hockenson is going to be out. So it was a good day for him on a couple of plays. Tristan Jackson has just brought it during this entire camp and preseason. We talked about Tristan last year somewhat, and he ended up, if I'm not mistaken, he made the practice squad. He stuck around. Did he make the team? I thought it might have been the practice squad and eventually ended up on the roster. I think that's what happened last year. But he's a guy who's been around for several seasons and has developed himself into a receiver who can go deep. And he caught another deep ball today that was from Nick Mullins, almost grabbed another one in the end zone. It was a 2-point conversion. He stands out almost every day. And there is a bit of a battle, I think, for the back end of the wide receiver group. And I want to talk more about kind of the battles. But Lucky Jackson was good today. Lucky Jackson got a shout out for some kick return stuff, for maybe some kick return blocking is what Kevin O'Connell was referring to. They did a lot of kick return stuff in this practice. And I'm curious about how much the special teams would play into this. Now, the reps for the game kind of looked more like Trent Sherfield had a better chance. With Jordan Addison banged up, O'Connell talked after practice. I asked him about the receivers, and he was very complimentary of Sherfield. Brandon Powell, we know, is on this team, but Lucky Jackson getting the special team shout out might make a difference there. Sherfield has a toughness to his game, but he's been catching the ball more often and making plays, had a nice catch in the end zone. If they have to choose between one, I'm curious who they go with. Sherfield has played a lot more in the NFL, or if they keep just the 5 receivers, if it's Naylor, Powell, and Tristan, or if they stretch it to 6, knowing that they may only keep 3 tight ends. We still haven't seen Robert Tonyan come back, so that might just end up being kind of a failure to launch for something that looked exciting early on in camp and in mini camp. But Sherfield, I think, is making a case for himself. And when we talk about this preseason game, which we can a little bit tonight if you want, I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm looking for is the battle for those receiver spots. Right now, it would be really hard not to put Tristan Jackson on this team. But if you're wide receiver 5, blocking in special teams, tackling in special teams, there's going to be a lot more kickoffs that could end up mattering quite a bit. Now, the unfortunate part of the day, as far as results go, was the Darnold 2-minute drive. And this I thought was, is it, how can I phrase it? Like it was demonstrated the yin and the yang of Sam Darnold, right? Where in this 2-minute drive, he drops back, throws a perfect pass to Brandon Powell, and he's right there. And it looks like the drive's going to go. So the next play, or maybe 2 plays later, there's a shot to Justin Jefferson. And then there's another one along the sideline. And then there's another incompletion to Jefferson, and they lose the drill to the Browns defense. 3 plays in a row, all pushing the ball to Justin Jefferson. He sense to go for it, just barely overthrew him on an out route that was kind of giving Jefferson a chance, and then forced the ball in the third one, and it didn't end up working out. And I think in a lot of ways, this is where if Sam Darnold is going to be better than Sam Darnold has ever been, then these types of things have to be shored up, because it's a lot of decision-making over his career. When I went back and watched a lot of him in 2022, it was really decision-making that was problematic. And, when we're talking about Sam Darnold, everybody brings up the saw ghosts, and that's tough and unfair, I think, in a lot of ways to Sam Darnold to consistently bring that up over and over again. He said that it was on TV, whatever. It's not fair to him that it was just one quote that he said on the sideline, and then you end up with that being thrown in his face. But I also think that sometimes he can get a little bit locked into one thing. Sometimes he can force the ball to one place and often go back and identify, well, actually, I should have put the ball here. I should have gone to this person. I should have ducked it underneath instead, rather than, going for it. But it's always going back and talking about it, as opposed to actually doing it in the game a lot of times with Sam Darnold throughout his career. And I think that this is where they have to mitigate some of those issues or just live with them. That there will probably be a lot of times where he is just going to be forcing the ball toward Justin Jefferson. And I think that that's their best chance, is if he's forcing the ball toward Justin Jefferson. But sometimes he could just hit the easier pass. Can they convince Sam Darnold that it's okay to just hit the easier pass? That I don't actually know. That I just don't know that you can undo that from him. I'm trying to think of like another comparison for an athlete. I feel like it would be a golfer who always pulls the driver, even when they know they should go with the 3-iron and hit it out into the middle, or the hybrid, I guess, and hit it out in the middle of the fairway, but they always go for the driver. And he is sometimes, when he has pushed the ball to Justin Jefferson, it has resulted in some absolutely awesome plays that have been highlight reel, and the team could tweet them out and they look super cool. But then other times, there has been, I think spots, sorry, let me readjust here. There has been spots where he could have just taken the easier route. And that is something that you'd like to see him doing. And I think when he goes back and he looks at what he saw today on the practice tape, that he'll probably say, yeah, I should have taken the easier route on a couple of those plays. And he did say that after practice. And I guess I just think that strap yourselves in is the way I would put it for Sam Darnold and what you're going to get. Because now that we know you're going to get Sam Darnold for the rest of the season, and maybe they need to look at bringing somebody else in. I don't know if Ryan Tannehill is still interested in playing football, or who else might still be out there, or whether they could pick up another guy off another team. We know that they can't really make a trade with no draft capital, but they certainly could, try to pick somebody else up that gets dropped by another team going into the season. If there's a battle that's won or lost, they're probably going to need somebody. I don't know if Jaren Hall is going to be on this team or not. But when it comes to Darnold, he's your quarterback. And you're going to have to just prepare yourself for this, because after today, am not convinced that he will play point guard. I think that's a thing that he is saying because he knows it's right. But can he actually make himself do it day in and day out? I don't really know. So it was only one drive, and it's something that they're going to look at. And it's also kind of told me a little bit too that Sam Darnold's in this odd position where everybody else knows the offense better than him. and has been in the scheme, and he's still learning it and he's still commanding it. And they're trying to bring him along and try to get him to fully understand where he should go with the football. And of course, Jefferson always wants a chance to make the plays. And he sort of joked, like, I have a lot of tape that says it's a good idea to throw it up to me, but it's got to be in the ballpark. And this is another thing that Darnold has struggled with through his career, is just the consistency with accuracy. Completion percentage is not a great stat for accuracy. I don't like that very much. A lot of time it's on scheme, but still at the same time, if you're completing under 60% of your passes, that's not good. Like, that means that you've got some accuracy issues. And I thought all 3 throws to Jefferson, but especially 2 of them, they could have been there and they just were a tick off. And it really shows you how tight the margins are. And so I'm kind of just preparing myself, as far as with Sam Darnold, to sometimes be very impressed and sometimes be like, I don't know what happened there. I don't know what happened there. And I think what we saw from the defense means that this team would have a chance to still compete despite that roller coaster, because their defense is going to be good. But the question is, how good do they have to be? How healthy do they have to be? Do they need another corner that could get them over the top, or are they still going to end up kind of stuck in the mud and stuck in the middle if that ends up happening? So a lot of thoughts coming out of the practices here. And if you guys want to start throwing in questions, comments for me to react to, hopefully this is working out okay as far as hotel Wi-Fi goes. It's giving me like no bars, so I'm hopeful. Please, somebody give me a thumbs up to let me know that it's going okay. Looks like it on my end, and a lot of you are watching. So, but it's just a constant struggle when it comes to, the Marriott Wi-Fi. Well, thank you. I will do the ad read shortly enough. I appreciate that. I did not pull it up here. You guys are the best with that. I give you an assignment. What else can I have you guys do for me and not have me pay you? I'll get to that in a minute, but let me get to some of the roster stuff where position battles stand. If you guys just want me to go through it. Good to hear that the audio and video are fine. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to go through quickly position by position with maybe a thought or two about where we stand going into the final preseason game and what some of the battles might be after we've now really seen a lot of reps in the way that I believe they want to design the lineup. If we start with the offensive line, what I'm really curious about is whether Dalton Risner actually makes this team, or if they would consider someone else. Tyrese Robinson is a guy that hasn't really got any discussion, but took a lot of reps with the second team. And I think Dan Feeney was maybe out today. I'd have to go back and check. But the offensive line, there might be some surprises there. Michael Juergens has a good chance to make the team. And there might be, if it's Dalton Risner or Feeney, somebody that they don't stick with on the second team that maybe we expected. It just feels like there's more of a battle there than I gave it credit for initially, where it looked like it was just all set, good to go. But maybe Robinson has a chance to make it a guard. He's someone we haven't really talked about at all. Other than that, Blake Brandel took every single rep. He's your left guard. We've always thought that, but this made it very clear that Blake Brandel is your left guard. He looked okay to me during this last 2 days, maybe not as much in the first day, but today I thought, and look, I'm evaluating an offensive lineman from, the sideline, but yeah, I thought he came along and the offensive line was a lot better today, but that group may have a little bit of a surprise. As far as the wide receivers go, talked about that a bit, but I am really interested to see, do they want to keep Tristan Jackson? Do they want to keep Lucky Jackson, who's had a really good training camp, and Trent Sherfield? I think those guys have separated themselves. It's really unfortunate that Thayer Thomas got hurt. He had a concussion yesterday, but they were thankful that it wasn't more. The way he went down was a little bit scary, but ends up being a concussion for him, which may count him out. And Thayer, I thought, was having a good run and may have been a practice squad guy. Wasn't likely to make the team, but it's really Sherfield, Jackson, other Jackson that are battling for spots there. In the backfield, Kene Nwangwu had a big run in the game. He's going to be the kick returner. It was a lot of Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. And as far as Dwayne McBride, they might want to look just for someone else who gets released, someone else that they might potentially like from another team, another free agent if they want one more guy there, because McBride doesn't really look like an NFL player to me. So that's kind of the offensive side. The tight ends, it's unfortunate with Robert Tonyan, but now at this point, he would have to come back, and there's not really training camp practices in the same way after this. Technically, it's still training camp, but after the second preseason game, it is now on to week 1 mode. And I don't think that there's enough time for Robert Tonyan to make his case. Maybe they'll release him, sign him back to the practice squad, which you can do. Rob, Brandel over Reisner for sure. It's 100% Blake Brandel. He's never taken anything except for a first team rep. Brandel has not taken any with the backups. Reisner has not taken any with the starters. And I guess I was wondering if they might keep one of the younger players and move on from Dalton Reisner. They did not give him much money to come here, to return here. And if he's not happy with his situation, he did miss some practices. They might just decide that there's somebody better. And that's why I was looking at Tyrese Robinson, who had a very good preseason game as a pass protector. I don't know that. That's not like sources or anything. It's just, I'm wondering if there's a bit of a surprise potentially on the offensive line. So with the tight ends, I think we're pretty much set there. It's just unfortunate for Robert Tonyan that he got that injury, but that allowed Nick Muse to step into a role where he's been pretty good. And we know 1 and 2 are going to be Munt, Oliver, and then when Hockenson comes back. On the defensive line, that one, I think that Jihad Ward is going to make the team. That was on my initial 53. I did not have him because there's always a veteran signing that just doesn't make it. And I thought, well, maybe that's going to be, this is the Kendall Wright, or this is the Dayton Jones or something, a guy we've kind of heard of, but just doesn't make it. But the way that they were using him in certain packages makes me think that he will be in, and they'll probably try to add the other guys to the practice squad. Gabriel Murphy hasn't been practicing. And on the interior, Levi Drake Rodriguez, I didn't see taking a lot of first team reps here. I think that may have been to get him a lot more experience in some of the practices where Jerry Tillery wasn't there, because they want him, what they usually want from a backup is to emulate the starter. And I think that Levi Drake Rodriguez can be sort of the backup Jerry Tillery, but he's not likely to jump right in there and start. They will have a decision to make on someone like Jaquelin Roy. It might be a little surprising if they cut him after 1 year, but I just have not seen him really step up to the challenge. He had a very tough game against the Raiders, so I don't know if they're going to end up keeping him. And that group with Bullard, Phillips, and Tillery is really set there. Trying to think if anybody else has really stood out on the defensive line. Not so much, other than Levi Drake Rodriguez on the interior. And they've had kind of a lot of guys battling for those spots. So that they'll probably keep maybe one more. Other than that, maybe Jaquelin Roy does end up staying. It still has a weakness. I think the starters are stronger than they were last year now that Levi Drake Rodriguez is there. And I think Jerry Tillery has looked good these last couple days. Linebackers should be pretty well set. Kamu Grugier-Hill and Brian Asamoah should be the backups. I think that, other edge rushers on that front seven and linebackers are probably going to end up. James Lynch. That's the one. Yeah, I'm going off the dome here because if I open a new window, I know it's going to melt this Wi-Fi. James Lynch, I think, has a decent chance to make the team. Yeah, I think so, because they're going to need backups for kind of each guy's role. And James Lynch did a pretty good job a couple years ago. Feels like he's had a decent enough training camp and preseason game. It can be really hard from the sideline to see the interior without, a video camera right over top showing you what's happening on the interior every time. That's hard to see. So it's a little more difficult to figure out, but based on reps, James Lynch has been getting in there quite a bit. I would say that he has a decent chance to make it. Where it gets kind of interesting, the safety room, Lewis Seen, I don't think is going to make the team. I think they're going to keep Theo Jackson there and end up with the 5 or the 4 safeties and maybe Bobby McCain. They'll have to maybe choose between those guys. The 4 safeties would kind of make sense to stick with. Bobby McCain has been in a lot, taken a lot of reps, and he has some versatility to his game. Could see that. And on the corner position, a lot of Jay Ward, Dwight McGlothern was out there. I mentioned Dwight McGlothern had a nice pick. I think that if Stephon Gilmore doesn't sign here, then a guy like Dwight McGlothern should make it. And a Caleb Evans, Byron Murphy, Shaq Griffin, and that's kind of going to be your group. I don't know about Duke Shelley. He seems like a veteran who gets cut and then gets added to the practice squad. Jay Ward, that's the thing about Jay Ward. He's now a corner. So where does that fit with their numbers? But if they just count kind of defensive backs, he might get the spot that they would have maybe gone to Lewis Cine. That's tough. That group. And then, of course, you have the punter battle, which I'm not sure. It looks like Ryan Wright is leading the punter battle. And the reason I think that is because he's done all the holding. Not as in holding people, but as in holding the football for Will Reichard. And Will Reichard is the kicker. There's no question about that. And he was great today. Just absolutely great today at kicking. So that's kind of my thoughts. But I mean, obviously you guys know the roster well. Maybe some of you could open it up in a tab and ask any questions about it because I was kind of just going off of the top there of my memory from how things were looking today lineup wise and what my expectations are. So let me go back to the top and we'll go through your questions and comments. Hunter saw a nice Josh Oliver highlight. Any chance that he gets involved in the pass game? I do think that. I don't believe that TJ Hawkinson is the only one who can catch balls in this scheme, because this scheme is going to draw a lot of attention to that number one wide receiver and the number two wide receiver. So that allows for the tight ends to get a lot of open space underneath. And Josh Oliver has proven that he can go a little more down the middle and a little more downfield than you would expect for a guy as massive as him. And he is a humongous human being, but he's also such a good blocker. And one of the things about Sam Darnold is if he has a clean pocket and he has time to throw, he can really deliver the football. They might actually want to use Josh Oliver in 6-man pass protections a little bit more if they can, a little more two tight end possibly with Josh Oliver than we saw last year. But, he caught some balls last year. He only had really the one memorable fumble because that was a really good play, and then he lost the football. But he can catch. I didn't feel like when they were throwing it to him, he was dropping it or struggling. The last two camps, he's shown that. I think he should be a little more involved. Ben, how does Brandel look? That's huge for sure. But is he getting pushed around or beat easily in pass protection? I didn't think that. I did not think that Blake Brandel was getting dominated or has struggled at all really during this camp. There were a couple of plays in the preseason game that I didn't love from him, including one time he tried to pull and just sort of went down with his head and the guy went right by him. The margins are thin with somebody like that. What I would say about Brandel is I don't view him as someone who could be a potential difference maker, but I also have not thought this is a liability. I haven't been seeing him get beat so often or struggling so much in the run game that it's just pathetic and they're going to struggle because of it. It looks very average to me. It looks like sometimes if the guy makes a good move or gets underneath his pads, he can be moved a bit, although he really does anchor himself. He's huge. He's like 6'7". So I think because he was a tackle and a really good pass blocker, that he can anchor himself against stronger defensive tackles. But the movement in the run game is not amazing because he is so huge. It all looks kind of replacement level, but if it's average, we talk about this all the time, then you can work around that. They need that from the left and the right guard. And the right guard, Ed Ingram, was not impressive in the preseason game. So far in training camp, hard for me to say that I can figure out whether he's going to be different or not, but the guards remain an issue. Has he looked competent? I think so. I think that Blake Brandel has justified them wanting Blake Brandel over Dalton Reisner, and also made you wonder if they should have spent a little more money for some of the guards that were out there, but guards got huge prices. That'll probably keep happening. Maybe that's a next year thing, depending on how he plays. Topaz had a friend who had the car when I was in high school. Of all the unknowns, what do you want to see answered the most before week one? It's a good question. I think it's most still probably the wide receiver position that I want to see answered. And that's the one thing that we can easily evaluate in the preseason game still. One thing we know for sure is that Nick Mullins is going to throw that football. And I think Nick Mullins is going to play a lot. They need to evaluate these players. So they need someone who's going to throw them the ball. And at this moment, I just don't trust Jaren Hall to really do that. So I would think that the first half of the game would probably probably end up going to Nick Mullins, I think. Kevin O'Connell didn't make any announcements like that. But I want to see Sherfield, Lucky Jackson, more of Tristan Jackson. These guys have all been pretty good at different times in training camp, and I think that's a really close battle for who makes the 53. I don't know that there's a lot of other questions to be answered at this point, though, as we go into the second preseason game. It feels like after this joint practice that we've got a really good sense, and then it might be just preference for the coaching staff between one guy or another at the 52nd spot, the 53rd spot. Lewis Cine and how they feel about him. There doesn't feel like there's a ton left to be resolved. Which corners they keep on the back end. Do they add Gilmore? I mean, that's probably another one. Do they add Gilmore? So if I was going with two of them, that's not the punting competition. Come on. We got to find out what's going to happen there. Although that I think is pretty resolved as well. Then I would like to know, are they going to add another corner? Are they going to add another running back? Like, who else could come in here? And then who's making the back end of that wide receiver situation? Because they've all been good. Let's see. Todd says, you keep mentioning playoffs. They'll be lucky to win one of their first 7 games. Well, the thing is, Todd, that when you have a team that's well coached, and I'll just use at the end of last year as an example with those Mullins games against the Lions, I just have a tough time seeing them lose all the games that they're not going to be favored in. Now, could they win 6 games because Sam Darnold isn't good? Yeah, I mean, that's very possible. You could have a good roster top to bottom that with average quarterback play would win 9 games and then not get it. And that is something that, I said, prepare yourselves, strap in, because a lot of outcomes are possible. I'm not running away from the outcome that Sam Darnold is just bad. And they end up, like you said, winning one of their first 6 games, and then they would have to deal with that. That's not what I've seen in training camp. What I've seen is some very exciting highlight plays and some other times where I went, okay, that's not great. And if there's that, then they're going to need some really good defensive performances in those first few games. I look at it as if you win 3 out of the first 7, you're in pretty good shape. Can you beat the Jets? I don't know what's left of Aaron Rodgers. Can you take, maybe a game against the Lions, surprise them? Packers, it's always, 50-50 with the Packers. Can you take week 1? But you're not wrong when you look at their schedule and go, who would pick them to win? And I remember, I think it was Mike Clay was on the show and we were talking about this. He projects every single game. And I think the Vikings had, other than the Giants, every single game was projected to be a loss. Their defense is good enough to surprise and win some games. It's also the NFL. Everyone is so good that if you are an average team, your chances to beat a good team are still good. It's still 55-45. If they go 3-4, then they're staying around in the race and they'll have a chance to get back in it in the second half of the season. If it's anything less than 3, then you may end up being right. It could look pretty tough. Let's see from Evan. So McGlothern for Mr. Mankato. Mr. Mankato. Yeah, I got to tell you, it's got to be Will Reichard. If Will Reichard goes out and he's a 6th round pick, very much qualifies for Mr. Mankato. If he goes out, because I'm trying to think if there's any real true surprises on the roster. I don't think so. Tristan Jackson got in a game last year. He's been around long enough. I don't think he counts as Mr. Mankato. Will Reichard, I was standing right underneath the goalpost when he was warming up today. And so he was kicking right directly at me. And right over my head, right through the middle of the goalpost, time and time again. He just put on a show, and then 5 for 5 today, along of 52. He has gotten a lot of buzz from us. He made his game-winning kick. Well, the game-winning kick, if he kicks even decently in these next two games, it's Will Reichert is my pick for Mr. Mankato. Skol Vikings says, do you think that the Vikings are more likely to make the playoffs or have a top 5 pick? See, this one's hard. After I watch the defense play, make the playoffs, but then after I watch the offense play, I might say against the Browns, this is the best defense in the league in the Browns, or at least top 3, top 5. Then you're like, well, top 5 pick. If you're asking more likely, sadly, the more likely outcome is that they would have a top 5 pick. That's just a fact, because the quarterback that they have is career winning percentage would suggest, I think he's won maybe 2 out of every 5 games in his career. And numbers wise, that's more of a type of, if he has an average season for his standards, then you are going to be picking very high. Or the other thing to think about is Darnold has been banged up a couple times in his career, as a lot of quarterbacks are. If he gets hurt, well, then you're in one of those San Francisco seasons where they had to start Nick Mullins for the entire year. So the answer is more likely to be a top 5 pick, because you can have one or two things go wrong. Justin Jefferson gets banged up. We saw it with Jordan Addison, where and the offense was better today for sure with the backup wide receivers, but Addison went out and was, whoa, this is not a scary bunch of guys here. Any setbacks for Hawkinson, any injuries on defense, which right now is actually quite healthy outside of the ACL injury to Mekhi Blackman. But if there are 3 injuries on defense, if it's Grenard, Van Ginkel, and somebody else, Josh Metellus or something, you're in trouble because it's not the deepest. I think it's a much deeper defense than it's been before, but it's still not the deepest where you could just lose star players and be fine. They don't have the quarterback that is the driving force that's just going to win you games because he's that guy. You have to make a bet for making the playoffs that he will outperform anything he's ever done before. I think that he will, based on what I've seen, or that he can, based on what I've seen. But if you were asking me to put odds on it, it's probably not that likely either way. It might be make the playoffs, 30% chance, miss the playoffs, or I'm sorry, top 5 pick, 20% chance. And then the rest is all what we think, somewhere in the middle. Skol Vikings, when will the Stephon Gilmore sign with the Vikings? At this moment, it doesn't look like he's going to. I get the sense that he is looking at some other teams, and he'll probably go through whatever process he wants to go through, make sure the training camp is over so he can just jump right in. Maybe they snuck him a playbook. Maybe they went to one of those printer things and printed it out and just gave it to him. Stuff this in your bag on the way out. Make sure you go study it so you can come back. But no, I don't know. Right now, it feels not that likely that he signs, just because he hasn't done it yet. That he left the building with a pretty good idea of how much the Vikings were willing to pay him. And my guess is that he went to whoever else he wants to sign him and said, this is the type of offer that I've got. That's just how I might expect it to have gone with Gilmore, but I don't know. If he really wants to play football and the Vikings are the only ones that are putting a legitimate offer on the table, he may come here. I would guess within the next 2 weeks, but remember, Dalton Risner didn't sign until week 3? It can still happen in the middle of the season. There's no real timeline on those things. Blue Stork, odds on Rodriguez making the team. How does he look? Levi Drake Rodriguez has looked really good. I think his odds of making the team are extremely high. Usually guys do not go into first team reps and get a lot of work. Today, he walked by me at the end of practice. He looked like he had a full practice. He got a ton of work this week. He's gotten a ton of work in the game. They like what they see in Levi Drake Rodriguez. And I also think that other people like what they see as well. You saw some of the quickness when he got that, was it a sack or a QB hit? I think it was a sack in the game. I think he's going to make the team. I think there's a pretty good chance of that. David, how is the team's demeanor? These guys, a lot of them are really trained to just keep going. As far as demeanor wise, everyone we talked to said pretty much the same thing about JJ McCarthy. It's not good, everyone's sad. They wanted to see him play. They loved his swag. They liked where he was going. And I don't recall, maybe it was it Sam Darnold? Either Sam Darnold or Justin Jefferson was talking about how, all the things that he showed and, the right track that he was on. It's just everyone's disappointed because of that. It must have been Darnold that was talking about all the things he could learn while he wasn't playing. And that's a major part. Like, it's been put in perspective that, he's going to come back. He's going to be fine. He's going to go forward as the franchise quarterback. When players go down, I think there's maybe a day of, oh man, gosh, that's bad. And then, all right, moving on. Next day, next man up. That's what they've always been trained to do. Every one of them has been on the field for guys who get hurt. They've seen guys go through rehabs. This is football. Injuries happen all the time in football. I don't think that McCarthy getting injured was soul crushing to everyone because they knew that Sam Darnold was going to be the quarterback anyway. It's more of just frustrating and disappointed. If Jordan Addison had gone out, maybe the demeanor of the team would have changed a little bit, but they're resilient people. They're going to keep working on through this. It's just, sometime at some point it starts to add up. But once Addison was not a terrible injury, then I think they were okay. Like, almost, whoa, we got a good break, and felt better today. But getting that news yesterday, some players hadn't gotten the news yet, which we discovered. But, most of the team anyway that knew got the news yesterday. And then it's, that was tough to go out there and then watch Addison get hurt. I think that did hurt the demeanor of the team a little bit. But for the most part, they move on. People get hurt. Remember 2017, you had Sam Bradford and Dalvin Cook get hurt. You still got to play the games. So they went out there and played to their strength. George says, if we score 17 and they score 14, or we score 31 and opponent 28, my advanced analysis says we win either way. Well, that's true, George. That's some really good analytics. Maybe 2024 is the year of 17-14. My question is, can Sam Darnold play in a way that would win you 17-14 games? Or can Kevin O'Connell call games from play calling that will win you 17-14 games? Because I honestly think with the defense the way that it is, you can win some games that way. Maybe even a lot of games that way. What it looks like against actual other competition, because you never really know until you see them play somebody else. And then once you see that, then you get a better feeling for, okay, this is how it's going to look when the other team's really trying to beat you, as opposed to maybe you caught a glimpse of the script that the offense is going to use today, or you've seen these plays before that the offense is working on, and you can kind of get a little bit of an advantage. All the players you're going against. But to see it so dominant today, even against an offense that I don't expect to be great, it's like, okay, maybe some lower scoring games wouldn't be the worst thing in the entire world. But can Kevin O'Connell, who didn't really want to adjust his offense last year, can he adjust his offense to play in a way that's going to protect Sam Darnold from himself? That I'm not convinced, because he didn't do it with Josh Dobbs and he didn't do it with Nick Mullins. Those guys aired it out, but maybe they'll go 31-28. The defense will still be good, but it's because of all the interceptions. I don't know. I think this team could play in a more defensive style, or maybe should, with Aaron Jones in the backfield. We'll see if that's something they actually want to do, though. They have been run a ton of play actions and stuff like that in practice. Maybe that's going to be part of it, but I think that O'Connell's going to be O'Connell, and they're going to be a passing team still. Real quick, since I was reminded about the ad reads and didn't get to them yet, let's start with US Cellular. US Cellular, presenter of the show, appreciate them. They noticed that the way that we use our phones is ironic. We try to put our phones down for dinner, but the menu is on a QR code, which is ironic. We hit the like button on social media posts that we don't actually like. Ironic, which is why US Cellular created Us Mode to help us reconnect with each other and use our phones less ironically. A phone company wanting people to use their phones less. Ironic. Let's find us again with Us Mode from US Cellular. Visit uscellular.com/built-for-us to get started. Also, next week, very exciting, going out to Circa in Las Vegas for the Circa Million and Circa Survivor contest. They are back. You want to make sure that if you have any chance to go out to Las Vegas that you stop at Circa and sign up for the Circa Million, where you can pick 5 teams against the spread each week. Winner takes home $1 million. And the Survivor contest, if you go 20-0 or you're the last person standing, huge prize money. Last year, 4 winners split $9.2 million. Costs $1,000 to enter, so get a couple buddies together, get out to Vegas, register there. You have to register in Nevada. Again, that's why I'll be out there. So if you want to come by and see me next week, Thursday and Friday, circalasvegas.com. And one more, our great new friends at Underdog Fantasy. I have been playing Underdog Fantasy best ball drafts left and right. And go listen to our fantasy podcast, by the way. I added this to the repertoire this year. My first best ball draft that I ran by my fantasy-loving co-host, he gave a C-. So you're going to want to go listen to that episode. I'm going to have to try to do better, but these best ball drafts are great. You just pick players. You don't have to do lineups, which is awesome for me. They just take the best players from your week, add it up, and you can jump into leagues that don't cost you almost anything, or you can go much more serious if you feel like you're good at it. Also, you're going to want to try Streaks by Underdog. It's their new thing. You can win up to 1,000 times your money playing the newest pickup game. Streaks, the road to greatness. Start your streak by nailing a pick 2. And if you hit 9 picks more in a row, you'll turn those greens into gold and become great. Are you ready to begin your legendary run? Hopefully you are. Sign up with the promo code PURPLE if you want to help the show. This is a great way to do it. Sign up at Underdog, promo code PURPLE, and your first time deposit offer up to $250 bonus cash. So there you go. There are the sponsors of the show, and hopefully there are more. Hopefully we have to do 2 ad breaks at some point because there are so many. All right, let me carry on. Let's see. Mike the Vike says Sam Darnold seems so nervous in front of the media. How is he around his teammates and in the huddle? So I think that Sam Darnold came out of college at 20 years old and went to the most difficult media market in the world to play in New York, and really makes a strong effort to not make headlines, which I think is the training if you are in New York. Even with someone like Eli Manning, who we know has a huge personality, he was not a quote machine in New York because you just have to kind of be that way. And even today, someone asked, like, how good do you think this offense can be? And he just went right into cliche mode. So when he is asked questions that are a little more direct, I think he's pretty good at answering them. But any sense of, are you looking for a headline here? He's going to clam right up, which I totally understand, that defense mode. I think Kirk Cousins got to be really good at understanding that it's Minnesota, and the fans really connect with the players a lot and like personality and those kind of things. And he got to be much more comfortable with that. Maybe Sam Darnold will as well, as he gets to know us, as he gets to know the fans and fan base. But he's not a huge personality guy. Like what we saw from JJ McCarthy was big personality out there, jumping, run around, celebrating, dapping guys up. I don't see quite that same outgoing nature of Sam Darnold. A lot of the guys were familiar with him or knew him before he got here, and have talked about how they like him a lot and they've hung out with him, and he's been somebody that they've known and respected for a while. And I think he's been a pro, very much a pro is how I would describe it. I don't see a huge personality, but he's come in and acted like a pro. And there's a lot of credit that needs to be given there. But I don't see him as like a rah-rah type of let's go and all this sort of stuff, jumping around. That's not really who he is. I think he's more of an even-keeled type of guy. And look, to go through what he's gone through in New York, in Carolina, to come out on the other side and have a team still believe in his talent, I mean, you got to be even-keeled for that. I don't think you can wear things too heavy. Like Christian Ponder, couldn't survive in the league as a backup. I think he just carried around the fact that he didn't succeed. But Darnold, he just keeps moving on. So I look at him as being at the podium, maybe a little bit of a challenge to get a detailed answer out of him, because he is in kind of the mode of like, hey, I'm not going to say too much. Also, I don't want to be making headlines or anything like that. Keeps it kind of low key. That's fine, and we'll see how it goes from here. No problem for me when it comes to that. But his teammates seem to relate to him really well. I think what is going to be something I'm watching for is just how the offense is managed by a guy who's still learning it when everybody else still knows it. And Garrett Bradbury was talking to us about this, about how he was kind of working with Sam and making suggestions about, hey, let's change up the cadence. Let's do this for a protection call, something like that, communicating with Sam. And that guidance might end up turning out to be valuable from Garrett Bradbury because he's been in this offense for a couple of seasons. I think it's a very difficult offense to just walk into and say, I'm the man here, because look, we know who the man here is, right? It's Justin Jefferson. Aaron Jones comes in right away with a lot of personality, a lot of leadership qualities. So I think if Sam Darnold just does his job and throws the ball where it's supposed to go, makes a few plays here and there, that he could be really effective here. Takes a journeyman quarterback type of mindset. I just don't see him doing it. And I don't see him doing it in practice. I see him trying to air it out and make big plays. But I mean, maybe when we get in the games, it'll be a little bit different. But when he said, I'm just trying to play point guard and stuff, I thought, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense with the team that you're on. And then we see today, now I'm going deep to Jefferson. Okay. It could be very Mullinsy. It could be, but if it's Mullinsy from last year, entertainment value is going to be high. And so are interception totals. Todd says you can't have a top 10 defense with two poor positional groups. Other teams exploit the weaknesses. Flores isn't touched by the hand of God. Well, I don't believe that I suggested Brian Flores is touched by the hand of God, but they had a lot of weakness on their defense last year. Somebody tell me where they ranked in points. It was pretty good, right? It wasn't that far away from the top 10, even though they had those injuries at the end of the season and they had weaknesses all season long, even a weaker cornerback group than last year. I think what they had last year was worse than it even is now with Fabian Morrow here, who's at least played in the league and has been okay at times. I mean, maybe because Blackman was there, but they only played him something like 400 snaps. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to the defensive tackles, that's an interesting one because I'm sure that that's what you're saying. Defensive tackle and corner are two very weak positional groups. And I mostly agree with that. But Harrison Phillips was a well above average player when he got here and through his first year. He was grading in the top 20 by PFF. It was really only last year where he struggled. And now if there's more guys there to rotate in with him and he doesn't have to play 800 snaps, that helps. Jerry Tillery's been good for this team. I'm not saying it's not below average and they don't have a beast there, but those guys kind of do their role and stuff the run and create lanes for blitzers. It can still be somewhat effective. It's really hard to make up for the cornerback group. So, I mean, I don't disagree when you're talking about having weaknesses of that much to be a top 10 defense. I'd put them in the fringe of the top 10 right now because their linebacker group, see, you say that, but the linebacker group is, or pairing is one of the best maybe in the league if Ivan Pace continues to where he's going. And then the safety group has to be the best in the entire NFL. So does that balance it out with some of the weaknesses? I don't know. I guess we're going to find out. They play a lot of good quarterbacks. I think it's reasonable to say fringe top 10. Sloth, what's the pecking order for wide receiver 5, Tristan or Trent? Man, Tristan has just been so good. He's made play after play. I'll admit I was fishing a little bit when I asked today Kevin O'Connell about the wide receivers, and he praised them all, but they were all good. I was trying to find out maybe who he thought got a little bit of an edge there. Trent Sherfield has some toughness to him that I really like. Tristan Jackson just keeps making plays, and Tristan Jackson might be a legit deep threat. I mean, he's been making a lot of plays in the deep game. I don't know. I think that's going to be a very difficult decision. They might think that it's easier to get Tristan Jackson back to the practice squad again. Now you can just keep putting guys in the practice squad. I don't know if there's a limit to how many years you could be on it anymore. There used to be, I think it was 2, but now you could put veterans on it. Whoever they cut, I think, is just ending up on the practice squad. I would be surprised if someone picked up Trent Sherfield or Tristan Jackson or even Lucky Jackson. But I'll be very curious, though. I think, gosh, it's hard. I think it would be Tristan Jackson right now, or they keep 6. but that's hard to work out on a 53-man roster. Trent Sherfield has really come along. I didn't notice him hardly at all early in camp, but he's come along. Mike says that I see Lewis Cine get a pick today. I didn't see I thought he maybe almost got one. I did not see him actually intercept the ball, but maybe I didn't have a good angle on a play. Maybe you saw a highlight on Twitter. I didn't see that. It's just hard to find a spot on this team for Lewis Cine. It still is. They gave him a lot of reps, and they gave him a lot of reps in preseason. But if you're talking about a guy who is a first-round pick that's this far into his career, can't get on the field, and is taking a ton of second-team reps this deep into his career, it's just hard to see. It's maybe they would cut McCain and keep him and hope for some upside, but it feels like it's probably over. Mike McGlothern seems to be one of our better corners. The way that I would qualify it is McGlothern has shown a lot of promise. As far as one of the better corners, maybe one of the more talented corners, but I don't know if he is better right now than a Fabian Morrow. Definitely not than Byron Murphy. Probably not than a Caleb Evans, because he's going to need a little more experience before he can get to that spot. But one thing I just noticed consistently is the guy knows how to play the football. He did not have amazing athletic scores coming out of college, but he's just always kind of playing the ball, getting PBUs, interceptions. And that's something that is a very good skill. That's maybe Captain Obvious, but it's a very important skill for transferring that over to actual games. But guarding wide receivers all the time through an entire season as an undrafted free agent, not everybody can be the next Ivan Pace, I think. What I would do is keep Dwight McGlothern on the back end of the roster, have him play special teams, learn about the NFL, and hope that next year he takes another step and becomes somebody that they can go to. That's how usually it goes with UDFAs. It usually doesn't go the way that it went with Ivan Pace. That was really something. Reconnected. How did Bo Richter look in Cleveland? I'm going to tell you the truth. I didn't pay a lot of attention to Bo Richter specifically. I'll say this. Bo Richter is the type of guy who always catches everybody's eye, and everybody always root for, and you should root for Bo Richter. But he's also somebody that you can very easily put on the practice squad, develop, and see if there's anything there next year. There's a lot more experienced players like Jihad Ward who are more likely to make the team at that position than Richter. He did a good job in the preseason game. It was also late in the preseason game when he was doing it. So, Paul's asking, do Richter, Levi, and McGlothern make the 53? I definitely have Levi Drake Rodriguez on the 53. McGlothern, if they don't sign Stephon Gilmore, is on the 53 for me, I believe. Richter would not be. Just sign him to the practice squad. I mean, it's just unlikely that you're going to lose somebody like that they're going to get picked up. And even if you do, the upside, and he's a good athlete, but the upside is unlikely to be a starter at that position. I mean, those are the guys that are starters at that position are usually Dallas Turner or guys that you spend a lot of money or high draft capital on. Not to downplay how good he's been. He's stuck out to me a number of times, but I think it's going to be hard to find a 53 spot for him. Total practice squad guy that can start working his way up. High Times KG says, would have loved to have had Teair Tart. I'll tell you, Teair Tart is a beast. He is a really good player. And for some reason, teams keep getting rid of him. I don't know. Not with the way this team does things. There are some teams that always bring in those types of guys, and sometimes it works. And they said he wasn't a scheme fit. I don't buy that. Teair Tart's a really good player. More likely is that he wasn't a personality fit, and they just said, go away. He was the one who got thrown out of joint practices with Tennessee. They released him midseason. And after I watched him in practice, I was like, whoa, they got rid of that guy? But then he didn't stick anywhere else. I think there must be something more to that story. So I'm going to pass on Teair Tart, though very good player. Very, very good player. Luis, how does Garrett Bradbury look? Garrett Bradbury's not going to look different than he's ever looked before. He's going to have more responsibility, and I'm curious about that as he leads a new quarterback. But the strengths are the strengths, and the weaknesses are the weaknesses. What I'd like to see with Garrett Bradbury. I just mean that they're not going to change. I think he put on some weight this year. It's just not going to change. I thought the last 2 years, though, is him developing into a pretty solid NFL center. He still got mauled by Kenny Clark, as he always does, but I would take him over maybe a third or half of the league at center when you consider his leadership and how he's grown into this system, how he's played a lot better in this system. His run blocking, I think, is okay. It's not maybe the perfect fit for this scheme. I'd like to see them get him out on screen some more, like they did maybe early in his career when it was Kevin Stefanski and Gary Kubiak. Would like to see that. He's a little better when it comes to the zone blocking. I think he put on extra weight so he could do the other blocking, but that weight over a season, it doesn't stick normally for guys who don't carry it like that. But overall, there are a lot worse players in the league. He started off his career with a lot of problems in pass protection, especially, but I think he's learned some craftiness around that. After 2021, it was kind of a wake-up call for him. I think that's what he maybe called it when he got benched for Mason Cole, and he's been a lot better under Kevin O'Connell. So I don't think it's different. It remains a question mark with that whole interior three, but he's probably the most stable of the three. Melkill. Do you think KOC said McCarthy's out for the year to cover himself? Seems like a long time for a young stud with a meniscus, maybe set up for heroic comeback at the end of the year. I suppose it's possible. I saw that being bandied about earlier today on the internet. I don't know. When we were first going over it, the whole thing with, is it going to be the short term? Is it going to be the long term? I was looking back at the people who had the long term in the season, and sometimes they were able to come back toward the end of the season. Adrian Peterson really pushed himself to come back in week 14, and he was terrible. And then he stopped playing after that. So there wasn't really a great comeback. It was one game against Indianapolis that went horribly, and then he stopped playing. That's not really inspiring. For McCarthy, here's the part where they might be thinking out for the year, saying out for the year, is, are you going to bring a quarterback in that hasn't had any of the footwork, any of the reps, any of the torque throwing off of his knee or his leg for an entire year, for 6 months or 4 months or whatever it is, and then tell him to go in and play a game? Wouldn't you rather have him just go through the entire offseason? Now, maybe they could have it be, week 18, JJ's back, he's going to play. I guess. But I think I would rather JJ McCarthy just take the whole year off rather than pushing it and trying to come back at the end of the season and end up like not looking good, not being confident. You might want his last game to be really good in that preseason game. That might have been something they talked about. And they have, in a few instances, held a player out maybe longer than when they could have come back. Jalen Naylor. Now, that was a concussion situation, but it's just maybe a precedent. Last year, they didn't bring him back in. I think maybe he could have come back in based on where he was at, but maybe just a better idea. Because I had the same thought when O'Connell said out for the year, and I went like, out for the year? Okay, that's unusual based on what I think the timeline is. But he may have just said, why would you push someone to come back in week 14 or 15 when they could just take their time with this rehab, take their time learning, then go into the offseason at 100% and not have any risk of banging up again? That's another part too, is that if you try to bring him back at the end of the season, what if he gets hurt? And then you're talking about a whole offseason wasted, and now we're just in hell if that happens. You might rather just put him on ice and see what happens next year. Blue Stork, has Ty James been a person at all? He is a person. I can't remember if you've mentioned him at all. He is definitely a person, but unfortunately, I haven't really noticed him for the entire training camp. Maybe a candidate for the practice squad if they like something that they've seen there, but I just haven't seen him making plays or really even getting out there. The number threes don't get a lot of work. He has not gotten a lot of work. It's hard to pop in a preseason game when your quarterback Jaron Hall just can't operate the offense really at all against Las Vegas. So, yeah, he's one of those guys that gets attention when he gets here. Like Mercer, it would be fun, but it just haven't seen a whole heck of a lot that would make me think that anything was going to go anywhere there. I think he's going to get cut, and that will probably be it for him, but we'll see. Let's see. Rob says, any update on Hockenson? There has not been. He hasn't done anything in practice. There hasn't been any steps that have been taken. We asked a few weeks ago to Kevin O'Connell, and he said that he was ahead of schedule, but he kind of always thinks people are ahead of schedule, and that's the best I got. I just would not expect TJ Hockenson anytime really soon, because as we sit here right now on the 15th, he would have to start getting back fast to be going for week 1. I suspect it's more down the road a little bit in the season, a couple weeks into the year. Brian says, assuming the Vikings don't play offensive starters in remaining preseason games, what will you look at to see how the offense is progressing before the start of the season? There really isn't a ton more that I can look at after this. I think we get another week of open practices to the media, if I'm not mistaken. I try to remember how the schedule cadence works, but I think we get one more week that's open where there's no fans, and that's it. And they're starting to put in the offense at that point, not really trying out for jobs anymore. So you're looking for just how they look. Are they ready? Do they look close? But, sometimes the hay's in the barn a little bit here. And we'll start to talk about some bigger topics, start to get some more guests on next week, because this, for all intents and purposes, was the end of the evaluation period of this whole thing. Now they're going to start getting ready to play games, and the team is the team. And I remember 2 years ago, Kirk Cousins had about the worst practice I've ever seen him have in front of us. We were actually in TCO Stadium for some reason. He threw like 5 picks. It was horrible. It was one of the last that was open to the media. And we went to Kirk after, and he was frustrated, and we were like, what the heck was that? And he came out and destroyed the Green Bay Packers in that first game. I mean, at this point, we can't make too much of these final practices. Everything's pretty much installed. They're going to go back home and start preparing for what they're going to do against the New York Giants, and that's where we're going to be. So there's not much more to look for. It's really kind of watching the preseason games and seeing who stands out, seeing if anybody changes the narrative about them, see if any of the receivers stand out. I'm actually going to take a much closer look now that I don't have to watch JJ McCarthy in the games. I'll take a much closer look at the offensive line and the backup defensive line and how they're used in the preseason and what that might mean. But from here on, the practices are going to be starters going against starters, and they're going to be working on stuff for the New York Giants. And these preseason games are basically going to be who's got a jersey that we don't really care about this year. You go play, especially the third one, maybe a little bit. But the thing is, if you matter, you were practicing your butt off over these last 2 days. So even these last 2 preseason games are going to be, and I'm going to do a post game, but it's not going to be a long one because there's not going to be a whole lot to talk about. I'm sorry, everyone. I think JJ McCarthy could have made it very entertaining, but unfortunately it's not. It's not going to happen this year. Next year, training camp, though, I'll be there. You'll be here. Subscribe. Do whatever. Make sure you're here. Let me scroll a little bit here. Let's see. Evan says, when Addison's sustaining a minor injury that may sideline him until week 1 is a big break. Yeah, I know. That's just where we're at, man. That's just where we're at. Let me dispel some fake news. A little bit of fake news in the old timeline here. George says, I hate the fact KOC had to beg Jim Schwartz not to be physical with his offense. The Vikings are so small and weak. That is not true. That's not what happened. So let me tell you what happened. Thayer Thomas went kind of on an out route, and the ball went his way, and he went down. He hit his head on the ground, and he was knocked out. Now, last night, I didn't want to say for sure I thought it was a concussion because I wasn't 100% sure, and they didn't announce it. And I feel very unsafe about saying injuries when I'm not sure. But today, Kevin O'Connell confirmed it was what we thought it was, a concussion. And what O'Connell was saying to Jim Schwartz, because normally what happens in football is somebody gets hurt, they move the drill 10 yards, and they just play around the body. And it's pretty craven. And so I think what he was saying is like, this could be a serious injury. He's really down. And let's just take a water break and then we'll get back. And this is coming directly from Kevin O'Connell, by the way. And he was saying, let's just take a break and let them, help Thayer, work with Thayer here, get him up, evaluate him, see if we need the cart, all those things. Just take a break and then we'll get back to it after this has been, dealt with. But if it's very serious, then, they might need to cancel practice or something like that. They did that for, I think it was Rondale Moore when he broke his leg. So that's what Kevin O'Connell was saying to Jim Schwartz. Now, when it was put out there, I'm not sure which reporter said that there was a conversation between them, but it was in more of a, this is what it could be, as opposed to this is what it is. And I think that got misconstrued and sent everywhere. And I got to tell you, I mean, just looking at the stuff that showed up, even myself. So I tweeted yesterday that the Browns players were heckling, and they were heckling the Vikings. Oh, they were saying, oh, you're 1 for 12 or whatever, and you can't catch a cold. So the Browns, and it was great fun. It was a really funny, like they're going back and forth. They were doing it again today. They're jawing. It's football. We're out there having a great time. So I tweeted out like, oh yeah, the Browns are really going after them and they're talking all this trash and everything. And then I see all over the internet, oh, well, the Darnold was 1 for 12. I'm like, what the? That's not what I said. We are in an era now where anything that anybody gets put out will get twisted and spit back out in any version that sounds salacious. Here's my suggestion to everybody. If something you see makes you go, what the heck? What is this? And you have a jump reaction to it, take a pause. Look at who it came from. Who's putting it on their Instagram? Who's putting it on their Twitter? Is it me, the real reporter who's here, a real person? Or is it a fake thing of a person who doesn't even tell you who they are, who's not here, who's not actually doing anything? And Mark Craig, by the way, clarified with Kevin O'Connell what that conversation was after practice yesterday. And yet still here you are, and I'm not blaming you, George. This is not your fault. This is the internet's fault. Here you are thinking the Vikings were so soft they were giving up and asking them to beg for mercy. That's not happening. I think there's also a difference with Kevin O'Connell between, I disagreed with the approach to Jordan Addison wholeheartedly. I did not think that it was strong enough when it came to the punishment or lack thereof for Jordan Addison. I didn't think any message was sent whatsoever. And they could say it was behind the scenes, but it wasn't outwardly, and it wasn't in any football type of way that we saw. But I don't think that has to equate to them being a soft NFL team. Like I think those are two different things. Or getting high grades on the NFLPA thing, being a player's coach, I don't think has to mean that the players are soft. Like I don't think that Justin Jefferson is soft, or Christian Darrisaw, or Jonathan Grenard, or Dallas Turner, or Blake Cashman, or Harrison Smith. If you want to call Harrison Smith soft, you can, but I'm not going to. So I think that whole thing, it's my suggestion. Ask yourself, who is this coming from? Is this real, or is this being presented in a way to just rile me up? Because, that crap ends up back on me or back on other reporters, where we're trying to put out the truth. And then people are saying, well, it says here that you reported this, that, or the other thing. Like, whoa. That's not it. Somebody takes one line from a podcast, one line from an article, and says, well, Matt says this. Like, what? Okay, maybe I said that as part of a 15-minute conversation about something. It's gotten pretty ugly out there. It's gotten pretty brutal. So if you can take your time, if something immediately surprises you and makes you outraged or upset, and this goes for everything, by the way, take a second, maybe go to a real source and see what the actual information is. I will stop now, but that stuff ends up getting back on us with the team, and people see it and they go, well, did you really say this, or what's going on? And all the time we're having to fight this battle, being like, no, that's just somebody begging for attention on the internet who's not actually here. So that's enough. That's enough. That's enough of that. I'll continue answering your questions. Is the faithful says any possibility that KOC changes and runs the ball a lot? That is on the running back. I don't think that changes completely is really going to be in the cards. I really don't, because it's just not who Kevin O'Connell is. He came from a team where he won the Super Bowl with the quarterback throwing for 5,000 yards. And I think in his fantasy world, if he was daydreaming about what the best outcome for this team could be, that outcome has Sam Darnold throwing the bleep out of the ball, right? That outcome doesn't have him running for 2,400 yards and a handful of play actions. It's not going to look like 2019. But if your running back is better, then you're going to feel better about running the ball. Stands to reason. Aaron Jones is better than Alexander Madison. And here is another thing too. Litmus test. If Aaron Jones can't run successfully in this scheme, then it's a bad scheme. Then you know it's not the running back, because Aaron Jones looks great. If he can't succeed in this, then it's not him. It's going to be the scheme. Caleb says, I know JJ will get mental reps and learn from watching film, but he will get physical reps before the season end and won't just play in games. Am I wrong? He'll be able to run and throw in 4 to 6 months. Yeah, I mean, he's going to be able to move his body to some extent, and he could be back, and maybe at the end he's practicing and throwing after practice. That's true. He's going to miss all of the parts where he would have been going in and playing and everything. And it's not good. It really, truly is not good. I mean, there's been a lot of kind of attempts to silver line it because you have no other choice. The only thing you can really do here is look at the positive side of it, which is he's going to be back. They believe he's the franchise quarterback. He showed a ton during that time, and you can buy into that. That fact of what he showed you right here, that he can jump back in because he'll be 22 when he comes back. But it's not better. It would have been better if he got in and played and looked great. That would have been the best case scenario. The next best case scenario is that he learns a lot from this experience and comes back, has a whole off season to get that footwork back, lock in on what he needs to do, and then is ready to roll. Start of 2025, that looks like what it's going to be. A meniscus is not something that when it's fully repaired, you start thinking about, oh no, this is going to be a long-term thing, or he's not going to remember how to walk. Like it'll be okay. It'll be okay. And that's kind of the main point there. It's just it's not great. Lizard says, if we are in playoff contention by week 13, then Darnold is playing well enough. I agree with that. If they get there by the middle of the season, then they have a chance to go down the stretch and give themselves a shot, because the first part of the season is so tough schedule-wise. They're going to need to catch some breaks in there. They're going to need the other team to fumble. They're going to need the other team to get banged up before they come here or they go there. And they're going to need Darnold to play well. This is the tough thing about football sometimes, is that you can have so many other things that are in your favor, but if that one guy struggles, there's nothing you could do. There's really no answer a lot of the times. Hunter says the thing that's odd by saying he's out for the season is implies he won't be healthy enough to even practice toward the end of the year. I don't know the details of the surgery or if they had to do more than they expected as far as the timeline. My expectation was that meant he's not going to play, but maybe they could have him practice. At the same time, you might have to give up a roster spot to bring him off IR. You can bring guys off IR now. It used to be if you put them on IR, they were done for the whole year, but you can put them on IR, bring them off eventually. Yeah, I really don't know why he was so definitively said out for the year, but I think that it just means, look, this guy's not going to play this season. We're going to use it for development. We're not going to force him in at the end of the year just because he's ready to go. physically, because we want him ready to go completely as a player, ready to play against NFL players, and they want to control that environment. That's just my guess. I mean, I can try to ask. Caleb says percent chance that KOC and KAM are extended. Who else would you want coaching this team? Side note, is Ben Gessling coming on? He's a great listen. Yes, Ben and I have already talked about that. Next week, Crystal Ball podcast will be happening for sure. Maybe we can even do a porch podcast. We live in the same basic neighborhood. But as far as the chance they get extended, it doesn't seem very high. I mean, Mark Wilf saying that they hadn't had that conversation. I just don't see it. I think they'll wait and they will want to feel good about where the direction of the franchise is going. But let me tell you, JJ McCarthy throwing the bleep out of the ball on Saturday had to be, for someone like Mark Wilf, you own the team. I mean, you don't want to lock into a coach who hasn't won playoff games and all that, but you had to see that from McCarthy and go, this combination of KOC and McCarthy could be pretty good. I think they'll get extended after next year, unless it goes so supremely terrible. I guess, with the Vikings organization, it's always possible that something goes supremely terrible. But if it's an average outcome, if it's Vegas's outcome, if they win 7 games and they're in some other ones and they're close in others, and Sam Darnold tries his hardest, but he's just not quite good enough, they'll get extensions, but it might be only 2 years. Now, if they make playoffs, it might be 4 years. There might be a little more of a negotiation if they don't make the playoffs, because that's the hard thing about drafting a quarterback midway through your tenure, is that you have a past. And if your past is one good season where you didn't win in the playoffs, and then the next season is not good, then the next season is not good. Personally, I think you got to stay on the Marvin Lewis patience, Bengals, let this thing develop, believe in what you have. I'm in with that. I am 100% in with that. But if I own the team, I might be like, well, it's okay if I make you show this to me, right? Before I just, right? Before I just give you huge extensions, show it to me. Go overachieve. We're in a tough division, but this is football. I've never thought it's a bad thing to hold people to a high standard. I've never thought it was a terribly bad thing for the Wilfs to not ever want to tank. I get it. I like tanking. I think it's fantastic. I think it works for a lot of teams. But if you're the ownership and I own the team, I might feel differently than that. I might feel like, wait a minute, I'm not paying this much for all these people to have these jobs. Let's go win, guys. Come on. You're the ones that talked me into, if I'm Mark Wilf, you talked me into Sam Darnold as opposed to Kirk Cousins. So go win. You've got a great defensive coordinator. We spent a bunch of money. I'm being Mark Wilf again, not talking at all like Mark Wilf. He's much more deliberate in the way that he talks. It's much more of we are the stewards of the franchise and we want to win football games. No, that's not a very good Mark Wilf. I'll work on it. The point is, if I'm Mark Wilf and Ziggy, I'm looking at this team and saying, we spent a lot of money on it. We gave a lot of extensions. We missed the playoffs last year. We were not happy. And you told us that you could compete with Sam Darnold. So let's see it. And if they don't make the playoffs and they're bad and they struggle, then I don't think it's time to be fired, but you need to win in these jobs, right? It shouldn't be horrible. You should be able to coach them to be a competent franchise. And then you should give me reason, if I am the owner, to want to see a lot more of this or to be skeptical of it. If they win 4 games, how am I supposed to say, you know what, 4-year extension? Personally, I think they're on the right path. I think they need to see it through. I just understand the perspective of an ownership that they want to be the Steelers. They want to be in the playoffs every single year. And I don't think it's some craziness of what they're doing. You got to win. What about Bob? Need a run game coordinator, also linemen, tight ends, wide receivers that are coached up to buy into running the ball. Haven't seen it yet with KOC squads. There's that. There's guards. There's also running backs that haven't been good. Dalvin Cook pretty well proved exactly where he stood last year when he just couldn't even get on the field. That's the guy who was running for them, same guy in 2022. He just didn't have it in the second half of the season. The first half of the season, he was running the ball okay, but then it just completely fell off. So I want to see all of this mid-zone kind of thing they keep talking about. I want to see it with a better running back. Till I see it with a better running back, I can't be too judgy because Ty Chandler did average 4.5 yards per carry. It was miserable. I thought they maybe should have changed run game coordinators. I don't disagree with you, but Alexander Madison kept running in the back of people and really had a tough time. There's only so much you can really do there. Life is about the odds says, look at how poor talent-wise this roster is after 3 years of Kwesi adofo-mensah. Remember, Jefferson and Darrisaw were drafted by Spielman. He is on shaky ground. So yes, that is true that Jefferson and Darrisaw were drafted by Spielman. That's true. There's not that many GMs that are new that drafted all their players. But if you're saying, look how poor talent-wise the roster is that really true? I mean, they drafted Jordan Addison, who does have some issues with his driving that need to be shored up. And he's got a little bit of an ankle footsie injury at the moment, but he'll be back. He had 10 touchdowns last year as a rookie. That's pretty good. They acquired him. Aaron Jones in the backfield, TJ Hawkinson, they traded a draft pick for. Pro Bowl player is out with an injury at the moment, but that's pretty good. We'll see on the guards, of course. But they drafted Ty Chandler, Aaron Jones, if they put together a good backfield. On the defensive side, their edge rushing unit is top 10 in the league. If Dallas Turner is good, it's maybe even better. Day one free agents, 3 of them. You look at the safety position, they've created maybe the best in the league. They've got cap space to spend for next year. It's more of a GM's job than just a one-year thing. And the outlook. Oh, and by the way, they drafted some quarterback who looks awesome. That's another part too. But I guess we can probably credit Kevin O'Connell more to that because he's the quarterback and that's what you brought him here for. But still, if we're talking about a regime in the total roster, I look at it as not so much shaky ground. I look at it as having an opportunity within 1 year to bring in more free agents. Remember, they got top tier free agents, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Blake Cashman. Those guys were right away in free agency. You're 1 year away and lots of cap space away from being able to stack up this roster a lot more. They found Ivan Pace, undrafted free agent, by spending on him. And they found some other guys that could be promising there as well. I look at the roster as in very good shape for the future, but you can't just go running from point A to point B when you take over a team that you have to take apart. That's the awkward thing about where the Wilfs put Kwesi adofo-mensah and Kevin O'Connell. They put them in a position to take a team apart and then put it back together again in the middle of their tenure. Usually it doesn't work that way. Usually you get hired and then you take apart and then you build in your vision, as opposed to actually, can you win in somebody else's vision? Sort of, 13 wins. But actually now, can you tear it apart and then not win as much? I mean, that's a tough place to be. I think they've navigated it quite well and made some mistakes along the way for sure, but navigated it in a way that they have a chance to spend. And also still, even as we stand here right now, and one of the strangest things I've seen over the last few days after JJ McCarthy got hurt is, I bet you wish you had Kirk Cousins. No? What? That was the best thing they did. Their negotiations with Kirk Cousins from Kwesi adofo-mensah were exactly what they needed to be, which was either you take the year-to-year type of deal or we'll see you and not spend $100 million. So they did that. Okay, this is a great way to end it right here. Great question to end it on. It's been a super fun chat. Longer than I expected, but you guys were great tonight. A lot of great stuff. Really appreciate it. And shout out Courtyard Marriott. Internet held up, no troubles. Good job. What positive things can we cling onto following this season? I assume you mean following along with this season, not like following like after this season. After this season's pretty obvious. JJ McCarthy comes back and they can spend all that money. But as far as following along with the 2024 Minnesota Vikings season, I just think, I have to go on Cleveland radio. Oh no, I got to go. What positive things? You guys think of some. Thanks so much for the chat. Forgot about my radio hit. We'll see you guys later. Football. Hello. Yes, it is.